go now to the US, where we're joined by Media Research Center research analyst Bill D'Agostino. Bill, thank you for joining us. It's been an extraordinary week in US politics. We are all glued to it over here in Australia. Do you think there's been a change in Trump's approach since the assassination attempt, as far as you can tell?
Well, there's certainly been some talk of him attempting to moderate his tone. I think we've had kind of mixed results with that. Primarily, you are really still looking at the same Trump, though. He's certainly trying to appeal to the same voters he was in 2016 and in 2020, although I would argue that the current iteration of MAGA is, I think, a larger tent Republicanism than what we saw previously. Aside from that, though, his policies and promises are essentially the same. It's a lot of the same platform planks. And so he may be in some ways personally a changed man after this assassination attempt, but as a politician, I think he's largely a known quantity at this point.
We've seen in the last few hours that the Secret Service has finally acknowledged that it rejected Trump's previous requests for additional security in the 2 years prior to that assassination attempt. What do you think the director, Kimberly Cheatle's chances are of surviving this, what surely is a crisis for the security agency?
Well, yeah, crisis is absolutely the right word for it. What's remarkable is that nothing has happened yet as far as Kimberly Cheatle's employment at the Secret Service. And I'd just like to point out that you said she has finally acknowledged that they denied additional security requests from the Trump administration. That's because, of course, she previously denied that ever happened. Not only she, but also the Secretary of Homeland Security, her boss. Also, he went on CNN and vehemently denied that ever happened. In fact, he called it a dangerous lie. In fact, much of the official narrative that exists, and there is very little of one right now from anybody in charge, has been proven to be false. And so you really can't put too fine a point on this. This is where conspiracy theories fester, in this absolute vacuum of meaningful information. Something like 30% of people on the left now believe that the shooting was either staged or that Trump wasn't in fact hit by a bullet. He was hit by a shard of glass or something similar. And then on the right, of course, you have people suspecting that perhaps some of this security failure was deliberate. And I'll be honest, it's hard to begrudge anybody for getting conspiratorial on either side of things when the amount of meaningful information coming from the people in charge is so clearly false and so scant.
You know, you've got to say that there is now what has to be an insurmountable amount of pressure on Joe Biden to exit the race. We've just been talking about how we think he can't possibly stay on at this point. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment. I'm not sure that it's realistic. I think that in general, it really comes down to what Joe Biden wants to do. Of course, the Democrats did have a primary race. It wasn't really televised because Joe Biden was functionally the only candidate. And so he now has all of the delegates that he needs to get the nomination. In order for him not to be the nominee, he either has to himself step down willingly, or else the delegates will have to go against who they pledged to vote for, which is permissible under the Democratic Party's rules, but would, I think, cause a very tumultuous experience for a lot of Democratic voters. And so I think that realistically, as long as Joe Biden wants to stay in this race, there's kind of nothing anybody can do to stop him. I know Obama's been trying to pull some strings behind the scenes and add some pressure to him. But until Obama comes out and publicly puts his weight behind the move to get Biden out, I don't think that's going to have any effect either.
What do you make of Trump's pick in a vice presidential candidate, JD Vance? Do you think that was a clever pick for him?
I do, actually. I think it was a very intelligent pick. Vance was really not picked as a running mate. He was not picked to bring in any additional swath of voters that Trump himself doesn't appeal to, which is often prevailing wisdom, although I think in some ways misguided. He was picked for the qualities that he will add as a vice president in the Trump administration. And furthermore, if anything were to happen to Trump, I think that Trump's voters would get something very similar to him in Vance. And for those reasons, I think that, yeah, Vance actually makes a lot of sense. He's not necessarily a running mate pick, but I don't really see that as a bad idea in this case.
Well, Bill D'Agostino, thank you so much for your time and for your insights from the US. Appreciate it.